This is Alan Seaborn from Winning at Home. Welcome to In Progress, a podcast about faith, life, and how we grow. And in this episode, just like in Steven, I went back and looked at this. You joined me for episode 10. And now I don't even know what episode number this is, but it's 30-something, I think.
All right.
And we're here again, so I'm excited to have Steven Kreitzer. If you didn't listen to episode 10, Steven is one of our counselors here at Winning at Home. He is the counselor that I see and that Annalise and I see together. And so he and I, obviously, we talk a lot. And one of the things that he did for our staff retreat 4-ish years ago, you think that's right?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, he shared about this personality, and if I say something wrong here, he'll correct me.
Totally fine.
This personality profile, personality typing kind of a thing called the Enneagram. And when he shared it, he had all of our staff take the personality assessment test, and then he went through and kind of talked about, okay, if you're this type, here's how you're going to react. If you're this type, here's how, and explain that stuff. And over the past 4 years, like at first, a couple of the other counselors got excited about it, and probably you had 2 or 3 like immediate converts, right?
Right.
Now, I honestly am not sure if I can go a day at the office without hearing somebody talking about the Enneagram.
It's true. It's exciting to me.
It's exciting to you. And at the beginning, like when you first started, my personality type is a 5, which I don't know why I'm saying this right now because no one even knows what this is, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And I said in our staff devotion shortly after that, I said, it's like it bothers me that people are like, oh man, yeah, you're totally like that because this is your personality type 5. I'm like, no, I'm not a 5. I'm Alan. Just give me a break. And Steven upset me even more because he's like, oh, that totally makes sense that you and your personality type would feel that way. I'm like, You jerk. So, all right. So that's the intro for the Enneagram. I really want you to just go whatever direction, like share some of the stuff you shared at our staff retreat, and I'll interrupt and ask questions and clarification stuff as we go.
Great. All right. Well, this is like giving a kid full reign in a toy store and just saying, go after it.
I know, right?
So I love this stuff. Yeah. So let me say a few things about the Enneagram. If I could give us a direction of where we're going to go or where I'm going to go, is if you're interested in finding out more about the Enneagram, or it's a buzzword now. I mean, it is everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's podcasts about it. There's tons of books coming out. I mean, everyone seems to be talking about the Enneagram in churches and psychology. So if you hear about it and you're like, I don't even know what that is, or how do I get started? That's what this podcast is for, to get you started, give you some basics about it. So what is the Enneagram? We'll start there. And you said it. It's a personality theory. If you want to,
okay, yeah.
If you want,
I knew I didn't say the right word, but
talk about. Yeah. But yeah, I don't remember what you said. But yeah, it's a personality theory, which I always say it unravels your system of being. And if that doesn't make sense to a lot of people who are listening, because they're like, "What in the world does that mean?" Essentially, the Enneagram is telling you who you're not. So this is a big misconception of the Enneagram, that I am, a certain type, and this is who I am. And I think we had that conversation at one point, because, it's kind of offensive if someone's trying to pigeonhole you and say, well, this is who you are. I don't know if anybody really likes that. So what the Enneagram's trying to do is say, here, take this assessment, and once you take this, it's going to tell you who you're not. So you'll score the highest on, let's say, a 5, or I'm a 4 with a strong 3 wing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But it's basically saying, Steven, you've adopted the biggest fears, the biggest desires, all of the coping defense mechanisms of a 4. And we're just letting you know that that's not who you really are. That's the clothing you're wearing. for whatever reason. And people ask me, are you born like that? Is it nature versus nurture? And I've never heard anybody give a straight answer on that because I don't think they really know, but it's probably a little bit of both. They both build on each other as you're growing up. So basically, I'm not a 4 with a 3 wing. I'm just posing as that. And the whole goal of the Enneagram is to say, if you want to be free from the 4 and all of the things that the 4 deals with, we can help you with that so that you can be who God has truly made you to be. And so the way they do that is if you look at it like a well, and if someone falls in a well, that would represent being pretty unhealthy, getting stuck and trapped in whatever number you are. And in order to be free from that, you have to travel up the levels of health and then finally be free from that. And so it's not like a one-time thing. I don't come out of my bedroom one day and say, I did it. I'm free. I no longer am a 4. So we go back and forth, right, all the time. One moment I can think I'm healthy and free from the 4, and the next moment I notice something. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, that's there. I still notice I'm doing my 4 thing. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what it is. So it's unraveling you psychologically in a sense. So people will ask me questions like, why do I get so angry when someone cuts me off in traffic? Or why do I have trouble being around people? Or why do I not like talking to people? Or why do I always have to go deep with conversations instead of just being on the surface? Or why do I never want to talk about anything deep? And as a counselor, this is the stuff that we're talking about all the time. Why do I do what I do? And a lot of the times we're frustrated with ourselves and why we do that.
Yeah, and I have to say, even though I started out talking a little bit joking about like, oh, you're trying to pigeonhole me, whatever, when I do so I'm in a unique position because Annalise works at the front desk at Winning at Home, and her desk is 6-7 feet away from Steven's office door.
Right. Which is bad for her.
Yeah, no, it's good. And so she's big into the Enneagram, and Steven will share resources with her, and she'll bring me something and say, read this. Does this make sense? Like, is this how you think? And I'll read it, and this stuff is really spot on. Like, I resist feeling like nailed down like that. Like, this is who you are, and you're stuck with this, da-da-da. And I know it's not what it is, but that's why I kind of resist it. Mm-hmm. But when I read stuff, the Enneagram is the best personality profile, the best personality system that I've ever seen in terms of describing why I do what I do, And so I think I find that really interesting, and I'm guessing that if you're listening right now and you've not taken the Enneagram personality typing test, we'll put a link to that in the show notes where you can go and take that. I think as you start to read up on your personality type, the number, it's 1 through 9, you'll see, wow, this describes me a lot more fully than, I thought anything would this way. That's been my experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, being in Masters of Counseling at some point, we went through a lot of the personality tests and, did samples on ourselves. And a lot of those I thought, wow, those are great. But what I found is I would say, well, that was cool. I'll put it on the shelf. Mm-hmm. The thing I like about the Enneagram is it's dynamic. So what it means is it tells you what you're like when you're unhealthy, average health, and healthy, and what you're doing to go in either direction. So it really is a transformational tool, not just a self-knowledge thing that I read and then put on a shelf. And so that's why I like it better than a lot of the other personality types. Yeah,
most of them, they're trying to kind of nail you down and act like your personality type is a static thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, you're like this, where the Enneagram is saying you have these tendencies, and when you're emotionally healthy, here's how they look. when you're not emotionally healthy, here's how they look. You know, and I think that's really an interesting thing.
Yeah, it gives you a tool in your back pocket at any moment. I can look at my behavior in a situation and say, oh, I'm doing that thing again. The Enneagram says that's going in the wrong direction. And as you said, it not only tells me why I'm doing or how I am, but it's telling me why I am how I am. It's so deep. If you really want a good resource that goes, I think, the deepest, by Beatrice Chestnut, and maybe we can put this in the notes, but
sure.
The Complete Enneagram. And I'm telling you, it is so deep. I love this kind of stuff, and even I have to just sit there and digest a page on yourself because it's telling you things about yourself that's the deepest part of you that you know maybe, but you really have never put words to it. And I'm telling you, that is so helpful to be able to do that and to grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you know, I'm guessing that you're going to get to this, you know, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or what I'm doing exactly, but the 9 personality types, do you want to walk through what those are and kind of the names, you know, because I think for a lot of us, we might even just hear the name and go, yep, I think that's probably the one that I am before I even take any kind of test.
Yeah, so here's the hard thing about the Enneagram. It's probably like anything else. There's levels of knowledge to it. So the first, as you're saying, the first level of knowledge, which is so important to this podcast, is saying, here's the name of the 9 types. And so basically what they've done is there's a lot of history and background. I'm not going to go through that because you could have a whole book on that, and actually there are whole books on it. But they're taking these 9 types and they're saying, okay, these are the basic desires, the basic fears, and this is just a name we're giving to what you've adopted as your clothing. Again, not who you really are, but what you've adopted. And so the first one is called the Reformer. And the Reformer is basically someone who sees things pretty black and white, and they are able to see things for what they should be, and they see the discrepancy. So they're pretty frustrated, many times angry types, because they want the world to be right, and they're very moral type people and very have trouble being gracious. So those types of people, Martin Luther King is a 1, or at least they say he was. I don't think he ever took the test.
Yeah,
but,
right.
They'd say he was a 1, so we need reformers. So with each one, you have what we would say is their superpower or their thing that they're really good at, and then we have the shadow of that, which is the negative parts of that.
And there's no good number or bad number person. You know, it's like, oh, crap, I'm a 6. That's the worst one. I hate that. You know, like there's not such a thing as that.
No, and a lot of people will read their number and feel shame, and that's not what the Enneagram is for at all. But if you do feel shame, you're like, oh, I don't want to be that. It usually is a good sign that probably is you.
Probably means it got you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's just showing you all your stuff.
And nobody wants to look honestly at that level of it. You know, it's like I'm willing to self-disclose a few things about me and go, yeah, I definitely have that issue. I definitely have that tendency.
Right.
But when you read a bunch of things that are right about you, it's easy to start to feel kind of defensive and to feel like, man, I'm not like all that bad, right? And that's not what it is. It's just when you see that kind of straight up honesty about some of the things that you've been, you know, trying to hide from the people around you, you're like, oh, you just feel so exposed. It's weird.
It is. It's really vulnerable to tell someone your type. Because once you know the Enneagram, you're telling them your deepest, darkest secrets, essentially, of who you really are. So number 2 is called the Helper. And these are the types of people that are usually very soft, nurturing type people. And so they'll be the first one to greet you at the door with usually a big hug, very personable, loving people, and they're really wanting to help other people. So they're usually well-liked, and their problem isn't having friends, it's saying no to all the people and opportunities that they see. So that's a helper.
Yeah, that's Annalise's type. And like when you're describing that, I'm thinking even the friends I've had for my whole life, like I'm pretty sure they all like her more than they like me. So,
right.
It's just part of the deal, right?
That's right. They're very likable people.
Yeah, for sure.
And if we were to get into the shadow of all of these, there's a reason for that when they're unhealthy, but we don't really have time to do that. But
this is just kind of a general overview. And if this stuff piques your interest, and if you hear something and go, oh yeah, that makes a little sense. I am kind of wired that way. There, like Steven said, there are tons of books and websites and podcasts and all kinds of resources where you can dig in deeper about your specific type. And then I've seen you give Annalise resources about subtypes, and there's crazy amount of stuff. But this is just it's not going to be a quick overview, but it's as quick as you can do an overview of all this stuff.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. So the third type, the 3, is the achiever. And you can spot achievers because they're usually really well put together. They're stylish. Everything is in place, guy or girl. And they're really concerned with being great at everything. So 3s are usually pretty good at everything they do. And if they're not, they're pretty ticked or upset or frustrated.
Or just avoid it. Totally.
Or just avoid it altogether. Like, oh, that's stupid. I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
But 3s, yes. And so they're really good at reading what makes people tick and then being able to get in conversations with them and give them what they want. 3s are achievers. At their best, they become everything that they set out to be. And people usually look at them as that's the ideal. That's who I want to be. So that's a 3. A 4 on the Enneagram, which I am, is the individualist. And individualists are usually what we would call the artist of our society. They're the ones who are able to dig or dive deep into the psyche or the soul and understand our humanity, things about life that maybe other people don't care about or they don't see. And then we like to express that creatively. So it could be music, artwork, it could be counseling, which is an art form, or speaking, clothing, whatever. It doesn't mean that if you're an artist, you're a 4. All the types can be great artists. It's just that's what 4s are obsessed with. They're obsessed with seeing the truth of our existence and then sharing their nuggets with people. So that's a 4.
Well, let me just say about that, a way to maybe get an idea of what that looks like. Like you said, you're a 4. And as we've talked about, even the 2 episodes of the podcast that we have done, we've talked about doing some different stuff. And whenever you get going, thinking about ideas on your own, I'm trying to reel you back in because I'm like, dude, that's way obscure. Like, I just don't see that being something that more than you are interested in. And that's how you're wired. You're just like, go. I'm excited about this new thing, and I'm going to dig into it, and I'm interested in every little component of it. And that's who you are. And you see that play out all over the place.
Yeah, it does. Comedians a lot of times are good examples of 4s. They just make things funny that otherwise are just normal things. So,
they dig so deep in on something until they find the humor in it.
Yeah, so we see things usually differently, which can be great but hard for relationships sometimes.
Yeah.
My daughter's a 4, and so as she says things, I'm like, wow, that had nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. But I'm like, she's a 4, and she's just seeing her own unique view of that. So try to see it in a positive light.
Right, yeah.
But it helps me realize all the times I'm probably doing that. But so the 5 is the investigative type.
This is my type.
Yes. And so 5s are usually engineer types or educational types because they create this landscape in their mind of concepts and constructs. And it's so fantastic because they're so good at thinking and developing things that a lot of times they would rather hang out there than with people or reality. So it's not that they're creating their own reality in a weird way. It's just they're thinkers. And so you talk to these types, and you will think that they don't know something about a topic, and you start talking about it, and you realize, oh, wow, I'm stepping into some depth here I did not even know existed, or that they even knew because they didn't even tell you.
Right.
And so all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah, I've done, and they're very humble about it. Usually like, well, yeah, this, and this, and they've read 5 books on it. And you're like, oh, I read 1 and thought I knew everything about it. So 5s usually are seeking for the truth, and they usually have this amazing construct already made, but they're very, if they're not healthy, can be stingy about it. So you don't know. My brother's a 5, and he had 2 or 3 patents in the engineering field.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. He wrote this book. I'm like, I didn't know he wrote a book. Like all these things that he just is so fantastic at because he's such a great thinker. And I didn't know. My mom told me. So I'm the opposite. If I do one good thing, I'm like, hey, honey, guess what I did?
Yeah, you're going to know about it.
I want everyone to know. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
But 5s, they have this wealth of knowledge. So usually if you want to know something, they're a great place to start. And it could be a one-stop shop.
Sure,
because they know so much about it.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that you gave Annalise about my type, I don't know how long ago, but was something about how I like to operate in secret. And I like to kind of do my thing. And I think, like, even reading that, like, operate in secret, like, it made it sound shady. But when you read through it, it's like, that's not what it's talking about. It's just that I prefer to do my thing my way, by myself. And then when it's ready, you know, I'll bring it out and I'll share it. And, you know, it makes sense to me why I show up somewhere and I'm going to speak on a Sunday morning service or something like that, and I get asked this question a lot, is they say, hey, what are you talking about today? Which is a totally normal question. It's a totally obvious thing you would ask the person who showed up to speak. That question makes me so uncomfortable because I'm like, well, just hang on. Like the whole thing is ready, but I don't want to just distill it down and ruin it. Like I've got this whole thing I'm building that you're going to hear me in like 20 minutes. Just wait.
Right.
You know, because I got it put together in secret, and now it's time to bring it out and let people know what's happening. Yeah. But I understand that that's not the normal way that people work. Right. You know, but because what's normal for you feels normal for everybody, I didn't realize that for a while. And I thought this is just how everyone is. Do their own thing, and then when it's ready, show it to people. So that's been an interesting journey for me to be on, because I get asked questions that to me feel like, what? How would you ever ask somebody that? Right. It's like, well, it's a normal thing that normal people talk about, but I resist it, you know.
And that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you brought that up, because the Enneagram not only helps you with yourself, but it gives you this understanding that, oh, this is the reality and experience of other people. Yeah. Which is a great gift for in marriage, with kids, with coworkers, with everybody, that your experience isn't everyone's experience. Yeah. So it's so helpful with marriages. Yeah. We'll get to Amy Jo's in just a minute, but my wife's, we're total opposites. So without knowing that, you just think, wow, what a jerk, or like how insensitive, or whatever. And it's good to know. So that's a great point. So we're I think at 6. Yeah. So the 6 is called the loyalist or the questioner. And it actually, in America, the 6, I don't know how they figured this out, but the Enneagram Institute says that the 6 is the most common. In America, at least. Okay. And so the 6, the hallmark of a 6 is they want to be seen as the responsible one. And so they basically pride themselves in, I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to do what's necessary. I'm going to do a good job. You can count on me. But I'm not so sure I can count on you. So they get kind of suspicious of people.
Oh, I was wondering how, like, that, even the name of it, calling it the loyalist / the questioner, I'm like,
right.
well, that doesn't seem like the same thing at all.
Right.
But okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, call it the responsible one.
Yeah, right,
Right.
yeah.
But yeah, they're responsible to people, so they're very loyal to people, and they put a high emphasis on that. And so if you do something to let them down, they have a hard time recovering from that, because they really want you to, well, be responsible to them. They don't trust you if you're not. So they place a high priority on that. And because of that, the other hallmark of the 6 is that they are really good at seeing what could go wrong in something, in anything. So my son is a 6, and at times he'll say, "Hey, Dad, should you be letting Bree, my 10-year-old daughter, do that?" And I look over and I'm like, "Oh, no, thank you." He's more aware of that stuff than I am as a parent, and he's 13 and a boy. I'm like, I never thought of that stuff growing up. I was a daredevil, but he's thinking about all of that all the time. So that's a great gift to give society, of thinking through like what could go wrong, what's safe, what's secure, and they try really hard to keep their relationships, their workspace, everything like status quo. Like this is predictable, it's safe, and that's the way that they're responsible to people.
Yeah, you can count on me.
Yeah, essentially, that's the phrase that they want you to say. So the 7, this is my wife, Amy Jo. It's interesting. Or Emily, actually. Emily DeYoung is a 7. She's the only 7 we have at Winning
That's
at
one
home.
of our counselors.
Yeah, one of our counselors here. And so a 7 is called the enthusiast, and they are the ones who bring the party. So if you think of the one at a party that's just having a great time, they want to talk to everybody. They're super easy to talk to. They're usually pretty energetic. And if you tell them something, they're going to get really excited about it, or they want you to get excited about what they're talking about. They have a hard time limiting their fun. So they just see the world as like Disney World. Yeah. And they're like, I want to see everything in this park before I die. And so that's their way of living. So people love 7s. In fact, a lot of people say when they read all of them, they want to be the 7. And again, there's no better one than another, but they are very important to our society, as all the types are. Yeah. But they bring the party, and they're the ones who get people energized and having fun. Yeah, that's interesting. So, as you're saying that like this is the one that most people want to be, I'm wondering, this is about me personally, so I'm kind of wasting time of anyone listening, but is that, like, because I find myself mistrustful, distrustful, whatever that word is, of a 7 usually. Yeah. And I wonder if that's my type getting in there somehow, like, because I'm like, no, how are you that positive? Like, that's just not right. That's not how the world is. Right. You're faking it, you know? So anyway, that's, I guess, one of my issues. And here we are. And I don't know. I've never thought about that. It could be because 5s, when they're unhealthy, they go to an unhealthy 7. So they start to get really scattered. Oh, so if I was doing that, it means I'm not in a good place. Right. But just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean that they're not in a good place. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. Could be. Interesting. All right. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm derailing. I know this isn't of interest to like anybody listening, because maybe all the 5s aren't. It's not a very common type, though, right? It's not. Yeah. Right. And most 5s are guys. So to be a 5 that's a woman is very, very unique. Huh. And actually, guys who are 4s are pretty unique, because 4s are usually women. 2s are usually women. So they actually have those statistics. Sure. So it does look different for each type. My daughter is a 4. And man, there's a big difference between a guy and a girl 4. I feel like everything's amped up as a 4 with a girl. Interesting. And again, that might feel sexist to people. I don't, but that's just, that's just the way that's been the experience, that you're watching it play out. Yeah. Yeah. So we're at the 8, which is the challenger. The 8 is known as the most powerful of all the types, meaning that when they come into a room, without even trying, they can take charge of the room. They can take over conversations. And again, they're not even necessarily trying.
Sure.
They're
so
just,
it doesn't mean that this is a commanding person. It just means that they have a commanding presence, if that's a distinction that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that they are both.
Okay.
So
Sure.
even when I was trying to show that even if they're not trying to command people,
Yeah.
they can't help it. They're just a bigger than life type figure. They're usually CEOs
Sure.
of companies and or bosses. They cannot stand to work under people usually.
Yeah.
They have a really hard time with that because challengers are really good. They're different than ones, but they're really good at seeing what's necessary to go to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So they can look at a situation, organization, a family, a couple, whatever, and say, oh, well, you're doing this, this, and this. If you do this, it would be fixed.
Yeah.
And they're like, they're done. And a lot of people will look at that like, wow, that was blunt. But 8s, they're trying to help people by challenging them to go to the next level, and they can see it so clearly.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I tell people, listen to everybody, but 8s, when they're telling you something like that, don't take offense to it because of the way they're saying it,
Right.
usually very bluntly.
Yeah.
They're probably right.
Yeah.
And that's just been my
Yeah.
experience. That's their superpower. They're really good at that. So I listen.
They can just cut through all the nonsense, all the emotion, all the complexity of a situation and just say, this is the way forward.
Yeah, and it's, to me as a 4, it's so refreshing because they're so real. They don't put up with any crap. They're just like, this is the rawness of it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it even though nobody else will.
Yeah.
It's great. So 8s are very helpful that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I had lunch with a friend of mine the other day, and he was, we were talking about some life stuff, and he was like, oh, okay, well, here's the way I see it. And he just said, like, boom, he just laid it out there. And he wound up texting me later. He's like, hey, sorry, I hope I didn't overstep. Like, I realized that was pretty straight up. And, it actually was really helpful to me.
Right.
Because I'm like, no, I think I needed to hear it that clear because it's way too easy to kind of dance around what maybe even in my core I know is true.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't think he's ever taken a test to see what his personality type is, but hearing you describe it and thinking of that interaction, I'm guessing that it's in that 8 personality type. So
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yep. That's helpful. So the last one is a 9. They're called peacemakers. And 9s, it's interesting because 9s hate conflict. So it's not like they're going around saying, I want to resolve all these conflicts. They actually don't like conflict. But the reason why I think they're called a peacemaker is because they're gifted at keeping themselves at peace so that when they're dealing with hard situations, they're able to be calm and at peace themselves when everyone else is saying, how are you remaining so calm in this position? So we need people like that. When 9s are really healthy, they are willing to go into conflict to create peace. So they're really good at being with people and understanding them. They call them the frame of a picture. So they allow everyone to be a picture, whoever they are, and they frame them perfectly.
Interesting.
So it feels like unconditional love. 9s make great counselors. You go and you talk to a 9 and you're like, I can say whatever I want and you understand it, you accept me. And 9s are really good at that. So it's a great gift that they give to the world.
To just be understood to the nth degree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just to let you be whoever you are.
That's great.
So 9s usually report, man, people just tell me everything. And they're not even talking.
Right.
They're just sitting there listening. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So those are the 9 types. After that, I would love to go through, if you do the assessment, they'll say things like wings or you go to this other number, and people are usually really confused by those things.
Right.
So it's important to know how to read your Enneagram report if you take the assessment. So first off, I want to say this. You are your type for life. Like people ask me all the time, can I change? I was different. And I would say, no, they're pretty clear on that you are a type for, like, that's what you latch onto,
Sure.
that you're trying to become free from. It's just in different parts of your life, you're healthier than others. So that's essentially it.
Yeah.
But the wing is on either side of your number. So if I'm a 4, on either side of my number, a 3 or a 5, that further types me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a 4 with a 3 wing, which I know 4s with 5 wings, and it makes a big difference because you have aspects of that number in you. So you're just further typing yourself. So the wing is important because it really is different. So I think they said Bill Clinton is a 2 with a 3 wing. No, a 3 with a 2 wing, and Oprah Winfrey is a 3 with a 4 wing. So you look at how different they are personality types. And we're not talking about morality or anything like that or politics. We're just talking about personality.
Yeah. So the wing thing, that was something that I had, I don't know about questions about. I didn't understand that I didn't get it, you know?
Right.
And so I think how I interpreted it was, I'm kind of like a half 5 and a half 4.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, probably the better way, this is a question, to think about that would be I'm 90% a 5 and then a little bit tend toward this 4. Is that a better way to think about it? Or
you could think about it that way, but I think when you're a number, you're the totality of that number.
Sure.
So you might think of it maybe like, I'm just thinking this up right now, so I'll have to think about this later, but maybe like an ingredient.
Okay.
So I'm putting flour in something, which would be your number. So it's all flour.
Yeah.
And then I'll add a little bit of this other.
Yeah.
So you're both.
Right.
But just a little bit of the wing.
Okay. Yeah.
If that's if that makes
All right.
sense.
Yeah. That doesn't, I think this is why, I make fun of you and Annalise a lot with the Enneagram stuff. Because I'm like, I've told Steven before, like, man, like you can't talk to somebody until you know what type they are. Like you got issues. That's not okay.
It's too analytical.
But I think that my personality is like, well, yeah, what you're saying is you just add in a little extra ingredient. I'm like, yeah, exactly what I said. It's less, it's diluted now. So it's 90% of what I said and then 10% of the extra. So
yeah,
if you can think, if you're listening and you're like, okay, one of those two makes sense to me.
Right.
Perfect. Run with it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if the idea of the wing makes sense, then you're good in the first place. But the idea is that one of the numbers that's on either side of you, you're going to have a tendency toward a little bit of that being mixed in with your personality type. So it's, you might see that part and be confused going, okay, I'm a 4/5, which is what I could easily think, but I'm a 5, but I have a tendency toward the behavior of a 4 sometimes in a few aspects. I don't know if that made it more confusing or more straightforward.
No, yeah. And the way I understand it is it just further types you. It's describing you a little bit more. And it's not a perfect science. Because some people will say, I'm a total 4 and I really don't have any aspects of the 3 and the 5. And I would say, yeah, that's actually possible.
Yeah.
And then other people like me, I'm a 4, but I have a lot of 3 in me. Meaning, well, let me say this. As you were saying, well, how do I know, like, if I'm a 4 with a 5 or 5 with a 4? For a long time, I thought I was a 3. And then what helped me distinguish is that just simple things like this, like a 3 doesn't want to be aware of their feelings, and they just think they're a bother to achieving. But a 4 has to, when they have a feeling, stop, go work that feeling out before they can move on.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, that's me. I can't ignore feelings. I have to go figure them out. And so that's how I knew that was the defining factor of I fit more with the 4, but I do have aspects of the 3. So anyway, it gets confusing though. You're right.
And in true 4 fashion, when you discovered that you were a 4 and not a 3, you were like ecstatic and you were talking about it all the time, and which I totally get. You know.
I was actually ashamed of it at first, which is true to 4 because we're so ashamed.
Oh, you kept it secret for a little bit, and then you were excited.
I didn't want to be a 4. I want to be a 3. But now I'm glad I'm a 4.
That's funny.
Or I struggle with the 4 tendencies.
Sure, right. Yeah. So one of the things that I was thinking of, I don't know what else you were thinking of hitting on as we're in here, but the 1 through 3, the 4 through 6, and the 7 through 9, they group together, right? And I don't know this offhand, so I'm going to lean on you for that. But there's, kind of a correlation between 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yes. So if you look at the Enneagram, it looks like the satanic symbol. It's not. It's 3 symbols that are put on top of each other, and there's a whole history behind that. But so it's the 2, 3, and 4 are in the feeling triad, is what they say.
Okay.
The 2, 3, and 4, they share some things, even though they're different types. So if I talk to another 2 or 3, we could say, oh man, I feel a lot of shame a lot of times. I just want people to love me. And, we'll talk about all the same things, even though we're different in different ways. We're different types. The 5, 6, and 7 are the thinking triad. And they are usually, thinking about things like, okay, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. What do I need to do next? And my wife's a 7, so she wants to think about things and do it. And I'm like sitting here like, no, I want to think about it. And, ooh, I feel this way. And she's like, I don't really care if you're feeling that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, for Annalise and I, it's the same thing. She's a 2 and I'm a 5. So she's in the feeling and I'm in the thinking triad.
Right.
And it causes a lot of confusion until you understand that,
Yes.
And I'm looking and like, yeah, okay, I get that that's upsetting, but now we have to actually like live in the real world and let's do it,
Right.
And I mentioned, I think it was last episode, but it was the episode I did with Mavis, and I was telling her that Annalise has been teaching me like surprisingly recently how to identify when I'm experiencing a feeling because I'm so far not there that I just tend to think my way out of everything and into everything and through everything, and that's just my world.
Right.
And so to be figuring out what it means or how I experience feelings and emotions in my 30s is really weird and it's jarring.
I bet.
Yeah. So, but you'll see this play out in your relationships with people like we're talking about here. To be, married to someone like both of us are who is in the different triad than you are, you realize like, oh, we just see experiences in a totally different light.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to see that and go, oh, okay, they're not just way off base, or they're not just, totally wrong with the way they're thinking about this, or even how I said that, the way they're thinking about this.
Right.
You primarily feel through things.
Yeah.
I primarily think through things.
Yeah.
So we're not even starting on the same way of experiencing the world.
Right.
Which is insane.
I know. It is. It's interesting. We all need each other. We can learn from different types because, and this gets deeper and deeper, but everything in the Enneagram is designed to either give you further information about yourself or help you learn how to get healthier. So if I'm in the feeling triad, I know that I need to work on the thinking and doing, the instinctive triad.
Okay.
If I'm in the thinking, I know I probably need to work on the feeling and doing.
Okay, so the 8, 9, and 1.
Yeah.
Is that the doing or the action, or
they call
I'll
it
let you do it.
Yeah, they call it the instinctive
Okay.
triad, which is they just intuitively know what to do. They don't need to think about it, feel it. And that's good, but it can also get in their way.
Sure.
Because they can just do it without thinking. 8s are prime examples of this as leaders of organizations. They're like, let's do this. And they do it, and it's right.
Yeah.
But they didn't consider other people's feelings.
Sure.
Or maybe think through everything, which the 6 is over there like, I just thought of all these things that could have gone wrong.
Right.
And they're anxious. So they can learn how to be more in tune with their feelings and other people's feelings. So each person will kind of look at the other and like we do with everything, like, oh, you don't think about anybody but yourself, or you're just so cruel. And they're like, well, you're just trapped in your emotions all the time.
Right.
Do something.
Yeah.
So we all get kind of frustrated. But it's interesting because those are really the 3 things that we're capable of doing as humans. We think, we feel, we do.
Yeah.
Our whole experience is based on those 3 things. There's nothing we can do outside of those 3 things. So the Enneagram is trying to teach us, as it does, about almost every part of life. Hey, I'm stuck in feelings. I need to do more. And actually, that's my path of health, is to understand how a 1, which is in the instinctive triad, they just do things based on principle.
Yeah.
Who cares if you feel like it?
Right.
We got to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's the next thing, if we talk about that, is when you go to another number.
Okay.
So when you, so as a 4, you're going to be a 4, but you're also, when you get unhealthy, you're going to show unhealthy parts of another number.
Okay.
So when you see that symbol of the Enneagram, you'll see arrows go to a different number. That's what they're talking about. So when I'm unhealthy as a 4, I'll start people pleasing and doing things for people because I'm afraid they won't like me.
Yeah.
And that's the unhealthy part of a 2. That's
Okay.
what unhealthy 2s do.
Yeah.
And then when I'm healthy, I'll actually just get stuff done even if I don't feel like doing it, like a 1.
Okay.
So I'll go to a healthy 1 and do things based on principle rather on how I feel.
Yeah.
So each type is not only themselves, but they further are typed because they have a wing.
Right.
And then they have other parts of other numbers in them.
Okay. Based on if they're operating out of a healthy or unhealthy worldview or place or,
Right.
Interesting.
So it's further typing you. And one more thing that further types us is called the instinctual variance.
Okay.
And this is something that I didn't get into until just recently because I thought, they're not that important.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But they're sexual, social, and the last one I just call safety or being safe. And they're not what the word is. Like if I have a sexual variant, it doesn't mean I'm a sexual deviant.
Sure.
Right? Because
Yeah.
some people look at me like, oh, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
No, that's not what that means. But anyway, as you read through the types, they'll talk about the variants.
Okay.
So if you read those variants as a 4 with a social, sexual, or safe variant, they're all going to be different. So in a sense, you could say there's 3 types of 4s, 3 types of 5s.
Oh, okay.
3 types of 6. So there's 3 types of each type based on your variant.
So I think what you gave Annalise for me the other day was one of these, a variant, and it was called the castle.
Yes.
And that's and I was like, whoa, this is weirdly, and I'm resistant to this. So if it wasn't right, I would be the first one to be like, no, I am not like that.
Yeah.
But I was like, dang, that really does describe how I view the world and how I, operate. And it was interesting. It threw me off how accurate it was.
It does. It's that one is the scariest in a good way to me.
Right.
As I read mine, I thought, okay, the 4 really nailed me, but this goes to a totally different level.
Yeah.
And in Beatrice Chestnut's book, I think that's where I got that from for you, is she really does a good job with describing that. And it is just incredible. So I have been learning a ton about why I do what I do because of that. So, good stuff.
That's awesome. Well, I know I'm looking at the clock, and I know that you have another session coming up. You've got a client coming in the next few minutes.
Yep.
So is there any one last thing you want to highlight, or did we pretty much cover it?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's basically what the Enneagram is. And then when you get your results back from your assessment, how do you read it? And we went over each aspect of that.
Yep.
If you feel overwhelmed, totally normal. You're
Yeah.
stepping into a huge thing. I've been doing this for about 11 years with the Enneagram, and I still have not reached the end of it.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is a very deep resource.
For sure. And we'll, like we mentioned before, we'll put a link in the show notes to where you can go and take the typing test in the
Yes.
first place, not typing like typing on a laptop, but
Right.
how to find out what type you are.
Yeah,
And then we'll put a link to the book that you mentioned.
right.
And then if there's anything else you think of after the fact that you want to shoot to me, we can put it in the notes as well. So,
Perfect.
Steven, thanks a lot for taking the time.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to, even if people are kind of resistant like me, to people seeing the ways that how they live and act and how their lives are played out in these personality types. And then it kind of gives us a push in the right direction of, okay, if I want to grow as me, what should I be doing more of? What should I be doing less of?
Yeah.
I think the Enneagram is great for that. And then, like we talked about, the ways that it's helped you and I both to understand our wives on a whole different level,
Right.
and see, oh, okay, you're not viewing the world in a wrong way.
Right.
You're viewing the world in a different way. And if we work together through that, talk about it, then we both gain a better way of understanding the world, because it's a more full picture.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope that everyone listening, if you're interested, you go take the test and start to put this stuff into practice.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Steven.
Yep.